From parachuting into the front lines of the battlefield to saving lives as a part of an emergency medicine team, our guest today is no stranger to the harsh realities of life and death. Nick Quinton is going to talk to us today on the Manlihood Mancast.
Are you ready to live life to the full? Are you ready to rise up and live a life of honor? Are you ready to boldly step into a life of courage? This is the Manlihood Mancast, and here's your host, Josh Hatcher.
Gentlemen, welcome to the Manlihood Mancast. Listen, if you want to level up as a man, if you want to become a better man, we have some opportunities for you. The first one that I want to talk to you about is the Arrows and Iron Brotherhood. This is where we're going to get connected to other men who want to see us go to the level that we need to. We've got education for you there with some amazing courses that we've put together. We've also got some tools that are going to help you to break your goals down into actionable steps, and then we're going to help hold you accountable with some phone calls, some conference calls. We're going to help you take your goals and your dreams and turn them into actionable steps, and then we're going to help hold you accountable to those goals so that you can actually do the things that you're dreaming of. You can become the man you need to be. You can change your career. You can start something new. You can lose the weight. Whatever it is you want to do, we're going to do it with you. That's what the Arrows and Iron Brotherhood is all about. So I can't wait for you to be a part of this. We're in the works of getting it all set up. If you want to be the first to know about it, go to manlihood.com/brotherhood. Today's guest was in some of the first boots touching ground in Afghanistan. He served as a paramedic in the UK and has some phenomenal things to talk about as he talks about his journey, the things he's learned, and he helps us apply them to our physical fitness, to our mental and emotional fitness. And this is really a great interview. So let's give a warm welcome to Nick Quinton. Nick, it is an honor to have you on the show, man. Thank you for being with me.
Yes, great to be here, Josh. Really, really happy to be invited on.
Yeah, so I've been kind of looking through your social account and reading the material that you've sent over, and I'm like, this guy is the real deal. You've got quite a story to tell, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd describe it like that, but I definitely got an interesting past.
Yeah, tell me about what it is that you're doing now.
Yeah, I still wear a few hats. Obviously, the main one being father of two young boys. But my focus and all my attention professionally at the moment is to try and help guys like myself get in great shape, physically turn up and be very much energized to provide and be there for their family and kids. So I kind of rebranded at the start of the year, and my main focus is all around fitleandad.com. And as the name suggests, it's around fitness coaching for guys who have got families, young families, and maybe not very much time and really want to crack the nut of health and fitness. And health, fitness has been a massive part of my life and threaded through all the kind of stories that maybe we'll get into around why I think it's just so pertinent and absolute cornerstone. Sounds obvious, but absolute cornerstone to kind of living your best life and being a leader in the family environment.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with it, though I haven't encapsulated that part of my life into that yet, and I'm still struggling through it, so I get it. And that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because I know that this is important, and I know this is something I need to work on, but I know it's something that if I talk about, then they're like, who are you to talk about that? So I wanted to talk about it with somebody who has worked harder at it, you know?
Yeah, and that's and so that's what's led me here, really. Not obviously, I think you have to be a role model if you want to kind of pull people along and support them. You have to be the message in everything that you do. And I think that's part of why I'm well placed to support people like us on their fitness journey and help them to progress. For me, I had some health challenges in my youth around blood pressure, and then I went on a sort of journey after I left the military into clinical practice as a paramedic, which is a slightly different role over here to the US. I'm based in the UK, and that really was a pivotal point for me about 6 years into clinical practice and reflecting on my own situation and what I was going to be doing in terms of becoming a father, potentially at that point, and living a kind of what I believe to be a healthy and energized life and a vibrant kind of existence. And reflecting on what I was doing in my job on the ambulance, and also the patients that I was meeting, and kind of the story that I tell around that is, and this happened a number of times. The example I give is it was kind of very late call on a night shift, so 2-3 in the morning, very rainy London night, as I'm sure you all listeners can appreciate. Always rains in the UK, especially at night. And we turned up to this guy that was diabetic, neuropathic, so he'd lost both his limbs to diabetes, and I'll give you the abridged version. He was a really lovely guy who his story transpired as we tried to help him up off his floor in his apartment, where he'd kind of been there for a long time and hadn't been able to get himself up off the floor or to the loo, and it was a messy environment, and that guy had completely lost kind of any dignity and passion for life, and there was just a very, very deep-seated kind of unsettling look in his eye. His story that transpired, and he was a really lovely guy, and his stories transpired that he small little changes, small little habits he wasn't able to get on top of. Some things didn't go well professionally for him. He kind of added more and more weight, and then all the chronic conditions started to pile up, and that led him to where he was and us meeting. And he turned around to me, and he kind of looked me in the eye, and I think he was maybe 6-7 years my senior. And he said, if you're planning to have a family, don't let this happen to you. And that was hugely impactful. I mean, patients say all sorts of crazy things to you when you're kind of out on the streets, but for me, that was a pivotal point and a turning point. And I probably compound that with another 4 or 5 stories like that. Guys who are maybe a little bit senior to me in terms of years, who had lost their vibrancy and their energy. And I specifically use those kind of nebulous terms because I want people to kind of understand where I'm coming from and kind of encapsulate where people are at, as opposed to being more specific. Maybe we'll get down the line to the fitness and tactics part of it. So from my perspective, the journey is as important as where I am and what I'm trying to do. And I what's important to coming onto these sort of platforms like yours, Josh, and having that privilege is not to sit on a pedestal of someone who's got a physique or a level of fitness or body fat, whatever it might be, and kind of dictate what's going on, but just to create that supporting network, which I think is a big part of what you're doing. And for us guys at this point in our lives, I don't think we have naturally a support network of people that we can turn to.
Yeah, I think that's a very true thing. That's really what drives what we're doing at Manlihood, because that support network, it's almost like it's uncool to have bros who have your back. You want to have people that, if you have to go get in a fight with somebody, that'll fight alongside you, but you don't have that unless you've got the guys who you've invested in situations across the board. You got to have somebody you can call when your marriage is struggling. You got to have somebody you can call when your kids are out of line or when you're having trouble at work. And that helps men be better men. So that's why I'm building what I'm building. So yeah, you're exactly right. I think that matters. And I can picture that guy. I actually have a friend who, similar situation, the paramedics had to cut a hole in his house to pull him out because he was so large and he couldn't get up. And, and it was a sad thing. And he said the same thing to me, like you better get yourself under control before it gets to this point. And it's that thing that's haunting me, that's driving me to work on that, cause I don't want to be like that someday, so I get it. So I'm glad that has driven you. So tell me about your time in the service. You were, in obviously not in the U.S. Armed Forces. You're going to be in the British special, or the British forces. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So British Airborne Forces. Started off as a reservist, and then went into the regular army here, and deployed overseas to Afghanistan in 2006, which was a pretty spicy time to get the opportunity to be out there, really, and that was a really interesting chapter. And reflecting on what you're saying there is, I think we romance this notion of brotherhood within the military, but it is very much true. And I feel very privileged to have that support network there. Now I'm outside, we still stay in contact, we still support each other. Unfortunately, the flip side of that is those guys need more support generally because the mental health issues of servicemen and guys that have struggled with certain things, and I think to a certain regard get drawn into that world. So it's kind of both sides of the coin. But yeah, it's an interesting chapter in my life. Certainly dates me now when I think it was 15, nearly 16 years ago.
Yeah. And so if you think about that, from one traumatic experience to another, to go from that into the realm of paramedic, I can imagine that the mental struggle there and getting that under control. I have family members who are paramedics as well, and that's a difficult job, the things you have to see and handle.
Yeah, I think it is. And there's subtlety to it. Like everything in life, there's real nuance, isn't there? We've used these big, broad terms, but the day-to-day nuance of kind of how we navigate it and our personal view of the world and our personal stories. So trauma in terms of blood and guts in the military, obviously there was a fair amount of exposure to that. And then you move into a clinical practice role where you're going to be exposed to that aspect of it as well. Is a kind of interesting, maybe from a psychological perspective, an interesting pattern to go down. I actually reflect on it slightly differently, because I think the jobs that we do as paramedics, if I think back there, the ones that actually are more kind of traumatic from a psychological perspective, and the ones that I kind of take home aren't necessarily the gunshots and the knife wounds, etc. The big trauma jobs, they tend to be a bit more mechanical, and therefore transactional, and they tend to have less of a residual effect. I guess this is quite an interesting reflection, just generally, as how we view the world, is the jobs that kind of you bring home are the ones that are impactful on a slightly different level, around maybe someone who you can connect with on a similar level, like the example I gave you. That was hugely impactful. Or perhaps a young child chronically unwell, when you're a father and you can see how much that's going to impact that father, and you have that conversation. In some ways, and in most ways, that would have more of a trauma response, I think. And when I look back at the big jobs, or the work that I've done that has been impactful, and I've had to come home and really process what's going on in here in my head, are not necessarily, like I said, around the kind of the blood and guts and the gory ones. They're more around the old lady that's been left on her own, that maybe there's something in her environment or in her story that connects to maybe my mother or something like that, and you can see a sequence of events unfolding, and your brain takes over and you kind of join the dots, and then that becomes a real imprint that's hard to get rid of, or a relatively young mother of two boys dies very suddenly, and clinically you're not really doing anything, but then that's going to be massively impactful being a father of two boys, and you just think, how does that all slot in? So it's interesting. And I guess in your question was around what drew me to that, and I think, I don't know, I went from the military into a very secure environment. So I wanted, we seek the opposite sometimes, especially when we're at extremes. And I went into the financial world and into IT projects, and it just wasn't the world for me. And then I sort of bounced back into something that was more hands-on and exciting. I guess that's what I'm seeking.
Sure. Well, and that's one thing that I've noticed as well, just looking through your stuff, is that you tend to be an adventurer. And I think that's something that all men kind of crave, but a lot of men don't go after.
Yeah. So now transitioning from kind of, I guess, an adventurous past and an exciting series of careers or things that happen in my past into a coach and a kind of a mentor and a guide and a support person that can support people in aspects where they're struggling. It's an interesting reflection on how I've lived my life. And sometimes when you're chatting to people, it's people tend to think of it as kind of like, oh, you've always done what you wanted to do, and you've always had this excitement in your life. And I suppose there's a truth to that. Maybe I'm just I've just been very selfish and self-directed. I think that's probably more a reflection on my past, but which we can talk about. But the point I'm trying to make is, I think, Joseph Campbell would reflect that I'm kind of evolving into a guide now. And to steal someone else's words, like I've always had the adventurous spirit, and then also the belief that you need to be a warrior before you're a king, and a king before you're a philosopher, and there's a pattern to life that if you don't follow it and you try and jump in, then I don't think you're going to find the richness in yourself and in doing the doing. And also, I don't think there's going to be as much value, because the connection's going to be much harder to make around the journey that people are on.
Yeah, I love the Joseph Campbell reference. That the hero's journey is definitely a really interesting reflection, especially as it relates to men. I think women go through it as well, but I think it looks a little different for women. But yeah, no, that's very interesting. I love it.
Well, I was just going to add there that we're all on that journey, and a big part of kind of what I try and transition through the fitness lens, it's trying to transition people through is into really embodying that journey and being a hero in their own life. And I know that's at the core of what your mission as well, and having that self accountability and really understanding that no one's going to show up to help you if you're not doing the work. If you're not prepared to kind of put yourself out there and be the hero on your own journey.
Oh, how much truth is there in that? I know that in my own health journey, as I've, lost 100 pounds, gained some back, lost 50 pounds, gained some back, that struggle, the people that I will ask to come alongside me and they'll push me and they'll cheer for the victory, then they don't want to help you the next time if you go back, They get a little burned out on that. So I can understand that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of friction, isn't there, to really pursuing your goals, whether it be physically, financially, or just to carve a slightly different path. And I think it's very human to kind of cheer for the underdog until they kind of get some success, and then it becomes really hard for people to support you because you're encroaching on maybe on their narrative, and they're kind of questioning.
Well, and that's I think what it comes down to is you've got to stay consistent and not just take but give, and so that's the stuff that I'm working on. So you talk about your past, and I know that there is quite a bit of a story there as well, with the way that you grew up and how it affects your life today as well. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely try. I'm not, certainly not one to hide things anymore. Now I've been through a process of kind of understanding and awareness. That's probably how I'd phrase it. But yeah, so I think, and this is probably a reflection for anyone listening, thinking, God, this guy's had a bit of a crazy life. It's probably a reflection on my young life as to what happened in my early adult life, and so I lived in Greece till I was 6. So my father's Greek, so I have Greek heritage. I lived there till I was 6. My mum then decided to remarry, and I was kind of transposed from a very kind of a nostalgic Greek village life as a young boy, very happy, into a very alien environment in a British boarding school, and kind of left and was left with on reflection, was left with a huge level of abandonment in what had happened in a very, very short space of time to someone so impressionable. And that, I think, was the first real big traumatic thing that happened, and the real kind of demarcation of my character, I think, to a certain extent. From then on, even all the way through my 20s, I would say to mid 30s or early 30s, there was a massive sense of uncertainty and insecurity in my life. And that probably drove me to, sometimes good things come from dark places. That probably drove me to do the very machismo things that we talked about a little bit, and seek the kind of the status of a guy's guy, and being able to stand up to the world, maybe because I didn't have that father figure in my life, and I was trying to kind of fill that void and build on the insecurities, as it were.
Yeah, I think it's amazing though that while that may have driven you, it also helped to shape you into the person that you are, because like you said, you've got that desire to be the guide, to help others, and to be that father, not only to your own children, but I think that's really one of the things that has amazed me the most as I've been working through this journey is how many people are just kind of craving that affirmation and challenge and encouragement and wisdom that a father would have or should have provided.
Yeah, and I think life's very much about perspective, and my perspective has shifted massively entering fatherhood, and before then entering marriage, and just maturing in life. It's always hard to we draw comparisons without necessarily the data to back it up, but we create these stories, don't they? These little stories, and for a long time, I reflected very negatively on not having that father figure in my life, and also the trauma at a very young age, and growing up with such insecurities, always thinking that I had to be liked by the people I was with, always thinking that I had to prove my worth as a man, whatever that meant to a young 20-year-old version of myself. And I think that caused a lot of sadness in my life, if I'm honest. And a lot of struggle, for sure, a lot of struggle. The flip side of that is it built some real resilience, and some fortitude to be able to firstly do the things that I wanted to do in terms of the adventurous stuff, but also reflecting now, it gave me that humility to have gone through the process. The only way I'm able to reflect on that now is after a period of really doing the deep work. And I guess that's probably a key take home from the stuff that I talk about now is, you don't know what your barriers are until you've really dug deep and kind of had a real deep think about it and done the deep work, whatever that means to the individual. And, that was a process of, I would say, 3, 4, 5 years. Well, if it ever ends.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, that's the challenge once you start that work, is that there's always stuff to work on. So
yes, but it's going to support what I would consider a rich life. Having the humility to think things through from a different perspective, and really working hard to work through what the ego does to us as guys. Do you know what I mean? And these stories that part of the brain creates that block us from seeing what amazing life we've got, what being compassionate, what being loving, what being able to cry, what being able to cry in front of someone can do, and how much that can add to your life. I think there's so much there, whether it's a societal, cultural, or whatever, or just inbuilt in who we are as an animal being, that blocks us.
It's really interesting to see the way that the men's movement has kind of several different facets to it. You've got these men that are like, just be alpha, be hard, go all the way, and there's good things that they're saying as well, but I think sometimes they miss the point when they almost kind of force you into saying, I'm only going to think positive, I'm only going to be happy, I'm only going to be strong, I'm only going to be, this one facet, when there's also parts of us that are sad and hurt and sometimes weak. And I think that when we can encompass all of us, I think that's a good thing,
Yeah, and you had Ellen Reed on recently, and she talked about success and her process that she's worked through from a scientific perspective. And I know there was a lot of tools and tactics in that show, and it was really good. But one of the things that really stuck in my mind is, like you say, if you just focus on these big goals that are sometimes very far away and intangible, and also don't have depth to them, like that very generic alpha role model that maybe we were brought up with, the tough guy, just tough it out. It doesn't have any depth to it, and there's no nuance there. And also it's such a far away goal that it's very hard for someone who's struggling to understand what path is going to get them to there, if any. And she talks about process, and that's a big part of the message that I have when I'm working one-on-one with guys is, let's work out what kind of the minimal viable exercise routine will be, or the process that's small, the habit that we can change today, tomorrow, the next weeks, and then see how we get on, and buying into the process of improvement versus these largely fallacies of kind of what we should be or look like.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to think of it not necessarily like, yes, you can have some end goals in mind, but maybe just start with, what can I do today? Yeah.
And I think strategy and so yeah, I do believe that, and I think the more. So there's different kind of coaching hats that I've had the fortune to wear, and mainly when I'm kind of on the public soapbox, as I am here, I talk about fitleandad.com and the fitness coaching component, because that is my primary business, and that's what I'm usually talking about and directing people to. But I've done lots of leadership coaching within the national healthcare system here in the UK. I've spoken to lots of doctors and senior managers within primary healthcare, probably clocking up thousands of hours of coaching now. And it's always interesting to me, the conversations and the limitations that those individuals have around the leadership skills and the intangible bits and pieces that really kind of allow people to firstly understand the process, and then build a strategy to get around what the barriers were. And that transposes exactly to what we're talking about here. And I think, having that simple next step is absolutely vital and a big part of it. But I think part of what I try to talk about, which is, it's a challenge, is also combating what the brain's going to do around seeing that shiny object or seeing that model on Facebook that you think, well, what's he doing in terms of his fitness? Because that's where I want to get to, and kind of cutting out the noise and focusing the attention and having an answer to what the brain will naturally do anyway, I think is probably the value add of having a support network, a support system.
Tell me a little bit more about what the coaching process looks like when when a dad calls and says, "Hey, I need to work on my dad bod. I need your help." What does that process look like?
Yeah, so I'm primed for this because I thought you might go down this road, but yeah, so I think there's a few stages to it, and the stages effectively form a feedback loop, and that continues as we progress. So the first step is really about enrollment and leverage. So what I try to do is take people through an enrollment process where they are articulating current situation and where they want to get to, A and B, and then the journey. And I think a good coach will help them to bridge the gap, obviously, but we need to enroll them on the journey as a step one. And part of that is the enrollment, is understanding, yes, I'm doing this. These are the reasons why. And then it's about building leverage against those reasons, why you are where you are, point A, and why you're not at point B, and how to get across that void, really. And that's no different to a sales process, right? We're trying to enroll people on their dream and really get them to buy into why they're doing what they're doing. And that's, I think people get that from whether it's a sales perspective or a coaching perspective, but we need to do that, even if it's you, Josh, trying to do something on your own, and you need to enroll yourself on why you're doing it, why it's important to you, and build that leverage. And so that has to be step one. And I think a lot of people skip that. They just go for the tactics, go for the tools. And then what happens? We end up just jumping around and never really seeing any progress or any results, because we're just jumping around. We don't really have that enrollment phase locked down. We don't understand what the leverage is. And therefore that first, so kind of focusing our attention is really difficult. That's step one. Then I think we need to focus on awareness. So what's happening now in terms of, so the three things that I talk about: fitness, nutrition, and accountability. What's going on with the fitness component? Is that aligned with an overarching strategy that's going to build towards the path you want to take, or is it confusing as to how that slots in with an end goal or a midpoint goal in a 3, 6, 12-month goal? Same with nutrition. So what are we doing now? What's going on at the moment? How can we raise our awareness to what we're doing now, and how that's either supporting us or not supporting us? So bringing that awareness up in fitness and nutrition is step two. And then step three is really tying those two pieces together with a good accountability model. So it tends to be, obviously it's a working relationship. And I think this is why coaching is effective versus kind of buying a book or trying to just follow along. The accountability piece, you've got, it's a shared model, very much advocate a shared model. Initially, it's going to be hard to be self-accountable, which is why I guess people invest and they go for things, and they go, they find that support, whatever shape it might be. So you're going to get more accountability from someone else, from an external factor. And then as that progresses, as the relationship progresses, as the skills progress, as the habits progress, then that accountability model needs to shift all the way till you're kind of self-sustaining. You've got your habits, you understand, you've got your awareness, and you're able to be self-accountable effectively. And then it's time to really progress independent.
Yeah.
So that's the 3-step, I guess, the straightforward 3-step process in terms of thinking about how I step people through it. What underpins that is obviously the tools and tactics, but I try to build that as we go, to make it bespoke for the individual, based on kind of where they are and when they want to get to. Not to say that everyone's different from a fitness perspective, because yes, we're all different humans, but largely speaking, the principles that I utilize for my own fitness are what I will advocate for pretty much most people that I work with. What I think is important about the bespoke bit is what I talked about there, which is the kind of the enrollment piece as well, and having the two-way dialogue about what's going on, and really building that self-accountability.
Yeah, I think I like the idea that some of the things are unique to each person, because I know, if you hand me a diet book, and say, this is what you should eat, for example, And if 90% of it is a certain kind of vegetable that I just don't like, we've got to work on that to have, because if I view that as something that I hate or something I don't like, yeah, my mind needs to change and I need to change my tastes. But, and the same with workouts, if there's just some people can do planks and some people aren't ready for planks yet, so not only the mindset stuff that has to change, but even the practical aspect of it needs to be kind of customized a little bit, even though the same formula is eat less and move more.
Yeah. So, and people talk about calories in, calories out as energy balance. Yes, they are the laws of physics. However, I don't necessarily think that they have high utility for someone that's facing a challenge and not able to progress through. What's important for that person is going to be slightly different depending on their life situation. And I think it's so important you meet people where they're at and you build confidence in why they're doing what they're doing, what the first few steps are, why it's important, why that has value. And also that the tempo of progress needs to match what that individual is doing and what their expectations are. And I think a lot of people come to me with my background expecting, a size 10 up their backside and screaming and shouting. And yes, I was a physical training instructor in the parachute regiment, which means I've had that ability to scream and shout lots and lots at people as they prep them for kind of an elite forces selection. But I don't think that's certainly not what I do anymore. Like it's not the way for an adult man in his 40s to progress, because you're just creating too much friction.
Well, and you're also that model is based on you being the one leading me or whoever to fitness, rather than teaching me to lead myself to fitness. Because your goal, obviously, you want recurring income from somebody that coaches with you for a long time, but your goal is to make them independent and self-sustaining without you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm always working towards. And that's kind of a graduation, really. And it's funny because people, when they hit that kind of graduation point, they don't tend to want to stop the support because they enjoy the process and that, that having someone there who can be that mirror, that reflecting point, it is always going to be valuable, I think. And done in such a way that doesn't feel like a dependency, it can work for a longer period. But yeah, I think it's so important to factor that into what we're trying to do when we're delivering fitness products or delivering nutrition coaching or making people accountable.
I just had this crazy idea. This is the way Josh works. He's a marketing guy, right? That's my background. So I'm like, what you got to do is you got to figure out how to turn your graduates into your coaches so that you can scale. like those multi-level marketing bits, like there you go. So you graduate and now you're hired. Here's how you can make you and me money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good idea. I think a lot of the guys I work with are pretty financially successful, so I'm not sure they would go for it, but I like it as a concept.
But
or they're very much in a career pathway, I guess. But
it just pops in my head. I've always got ideas. If I could harness all my ideas and turn them all into what they could be, I'd be a millionaire. So.
Yeah, and I'm the same. Like I never really consider myself a creative mind, and my schooling and education was science focused, I guess. Although my father is a musician, but I think you listen to Seth Godin and stuff. Like you can be creative in any role, and I think I hid from the professional fitness persona for a long time. and I didn't need to. Like I should have gone full in earlier, because you can be as creative as you want in any sphere of life, really. But it never really clicked with me, and I always wanted to be, progressing and being able to create something that was a little bit creative in what I did, or had a career path laid out for me that had that progression there. And I think I kind of missed the trick from that perspective, coming to it later on. But hey,
Yeah, it's awesome. I can see the creativity as I'm looking through the work that you're putting out, and I'm like, you can tell there's some thought and some intention, and I think it makes a big difference too in how your message is portrayed, and I think you do a good job with that, man. So we talked about that process.
thank you very much.
Somebody decides they want to get fit, they want to make a difference in their life, they connect with you, and you walk them through the process. Do you have a lot of people I guess that's my question. Do you have a good filter for who's really in and who's like, okay, I'm not going to work with you because you're not in, do you have that kind of process in there to weed out the people that aren't going to commit?
Unfortunately not. Well, I guess longevity is the test, but not up front. And I don't really worry about it too much from a business perspective. And I'll give you an interesting story, very recent story. So in a second, but I don't worry about it. So if people are happy to come on, and my coaching is inexpensive and in the wider sphere, and that's because I want to attract people. I want to enroll them on kind of their own process, really. Therefore, it does happen, right? You're going to get people that come through the doors. A much higher price point, it's probably going to happen less, but that's how I've set things up. So people do come through the doors and get a third, a half, 3/4 of the way down a process, and then kind of disappear, drop off. And that's what happens. I don't worry about it, because I like to think that at some point they might reflect back on that, and I've had some sort of impact. It's unfortunate, because I feel like, sometimes not sometimes, they're always the people that need more support and need to be listening to the messages. And that's a real struggle of kind of the game, really, is the ones that are super keen are the ones that are going to push through, get things, get results, and get through the hoops that you set for them, and come to terms with it all. The ones that kind of come in a little bit and dip their toe, or do bits and pieces and then disappear, are probably the ones that need more support and would benefit more from doing everything really well. That's a bit of part of life. I don't tend to worry too much, because I'm hoping that I'll have some impact on those people. And it does happen. Sometimes they come back round. You're able to share messages with humility and leave doors open. It's, people do come back round, and my aspirations is that I've had some sort of impact on those guys. The story that I was going to tell is based on that. So I recently had a prospecting conversation with someone that was very keen to come on as a coaching client with me. We went through all the challenges. We broke down why this guy hadn't got the results. So just hit 50, I believe. Always wasn't hugely overweight, but always carried some belly fat since his 20s, is what he explained. And time had come to kind of do something about it. Never really had a strength program, never really had a focused fitness strategy that was aligned with where he wanted to get to. Nutrition was a little bit of a mess, so there was obvious things to kind of attack, and very much brought into it. I finished the conversation. I followed up, as I do. I'd like to give people a little bit of time, not jumping them too quickly. I followed up the same day with an email, to which he replied saying, "Oh, actually, I'm not going to do your program. I'm not going to work with you. I've got a gym in the new house, a new building that I've moved into. I'm going to give that a go and see how I get on my own." And I think I think like an easy reflection would be he hasn't done it in 30 years. Like what suddenly has changed to now for him to do it and get a result without support, when we went round and round around having a good solid strategy that he was able to execute against. So things like that do pop up, and you feel like people kind of shooting themselves in the foot, even once they're kind of down the path of speaking to someone like me, or trying to, taking some real positive steps. What I would add there, actually, thinking it through, is a reflection around what we all do innately, I think, and especially guys, we're classic for this. And I think is, firstly, we don't talk to other guys about our problems, our challenges. And a part of that, I think, is this kind of barrier that we have in our head, thinking that we can do things on our own, and thinking not necessarily that we can, that we should be able to. And I think that's such a trap that people fall into, especially guys. The ego gets in the way. They feel that they should know about nutrition. They should know about health and fitness, that they should have the skills that they evidently don't have, because otherwise they would be able to progress through and develop the habits that would move them down the path. And I think we all get caught up in that trap, and it's such a psychological trap of thinking that we should know things. And I think culturally, I don't want to get too political, but culturally there's a lot of kind of shame and blame around how we get brought up in the world. And that's what creates that trap, really. But the way I tend to phrase it, like, is it reasonable that you don't know much about nutrition when you've never really focused on it, brought any awareness to it, or had any training in it? Like, is it reasonable that you step into a NASA spaceship and be like, right, where's the on button? Let's go for this. Like, and you're talking about human body. It's probably more complex than that system.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a virtue in self-reliance, right? There's something good about it. The truth is, if I want to lose weight, the only one who can do it is me. There's truth to that. But the other side of that pendulum is that we need others to hold us to task. So I think that's a really interesting observation, and I think there's some good stuff that we can take from that. So, Nick, I like to ask all of my guests a few questions, and it always makes my interviews interesting, I think, just to kind of hear the different perspectives on them. So the first question I have for you is, what does it take to be a man?
So I'm primed for these. I'm ready. I think that's a difficult question to answer. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 things that I think would make up a good answer to this question. I think you need a resilient mind and body. So that needs to be a priority. Energy management. So that's kind of a high level priority. Energy management on a day-to-day basis. So being able to manage your energy, and a lot of the content I put out is about energy, because I think firstly, lots of people aren't talking about it. As a dad of a young family, it's something that I'm constantly challenged with. So finding solutions is important to me. And energy is something that can be renewed by fitness, renewed by nutrition. And I think sometimes people frame it the other way around, like it's going to take a lot of effort to go to the gym and put the work in. I'm going to have to find time to do that. And the reframe that I think is very powerful is if you say, no, I need to manage my energy. Part of that, obviously, is cutting out the noise and the good bits that we know we need to do. But part of that is having a good fitness regime and minding your nutrition, because it's going to add value to your life. It's not going to detract. It's not in the minus box. It's adding energy. So energy management's number 2. Doing the deep work that we talked about a little bit in my past to remove the barriers. So like I said, you had Dr. Ellen Reed on, and she talked through some really good tactics and tools. I think there's a step before that stops a lot of people taking action. And that's the barriers that they have, the psychological barriers, maybe the physical barriers, but more often not psychological barriers. And the only way to break through that is to really do some deep work to uncover what stopped you in the past, what that's linked to, and how to progress through that, and what the minimal viable step is to allow yourself, give yourself the permission to take action and break through those barriers. So resilient mind and body, energy management, removing barriers, and the fourth one is being kind and compassionate, and that starts with yourself. Like for me, it's the antithesis to this alpha male model that we've been kind of fed around tough guy. I think we need to have a resilient body and be physically robust. However, kindness and compassion are at the forefront of everything that I do now when I speak to guys like myself, and with myself as well. It's unreasonable to know everything or anything really. So why not start with humility and compassion? So those are my four things that I think are absolutely vital to being a man in the modern world.
Awesome. I like that. I think I can relate to that process. So maybe that's one of your next books that you should put together or write, if you've ever thought about it. That'd be a really, there's enough there to put it all together. So I love it. So my next question for you is this, Nick: if you were to run into the 10-year-old version of Nicholas, what do you want him to know? What do you want to tell him?
So I think this is a really difficult question for me to answer, because I was pretty unhappy, I think, reflecting back now, and it was a very turbulent time in my younger youth. Probably what I would want, I guess there's two aspects to it. One would be to say, like, everything's going to be all right, like, don't worry, and just give him a big hug and just have that kind of understanding approach and not really say anything. The flip side of that, the other component to it, would be to say that the struggle now is you're gonna be able to leverage that. It's gonna add value to who you're gonna become as a human.
Yeah, I always love to think about just my science fiction mind always worries about, would we mess up the space-time continuum if we, would we be the same person that told that kid what he needed to hear if, but I think you're right. I think that just as a kid, I knew that I needed that reassurance it's going to be all right. And I don't, and there may have been people trying to give it to me, and maybe I couldn't have heard it, which I think might have been part of the process. We couldn't hear it anyway. So.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, it's so hard, isn't it, to reflect back and I mean, I don't know about 10, but certainly my 20s. Like, there's lots of things I would like to have said to a 20-year-old version of me, but I know for a fact they would have fallen on absolute deaf ears.
Yeah. So my next question for you is, what is your best advice for the men that are listening today?
I've got 3. Number 1 is seek discomfort. Everything that we've set ourselves up for now in the modern world is to make life easy and shortcut what has brought us the health and energy that we had prior to having all the luxuries that we all have now and the comfort that we all live in. So seeking discomfort on a daily basis, I think is only going to add value on lots and lots of different layers, whether that be a fitness or health perspective or a psychological resilience perspective. It needs to be a factor of life in today's world. So seek discomfort. Number 2 is aggressive action. So clearly I've come from a place where controlled aggression is a big part of what we were asked to do as shock troops in the airborne forces. That is still a theme in my life. However, I've transposed that into something that I think is much more meaningful, which is taking aggressive action. So don't give yourself the remit, the excuse to to try something, to dabble. The world is full of dabblers. If you're going to do something, do it aggressively and assertively and really go for it. Number 2, aggressive action. And number 3, the more and more I think about this and the more I mature in my life, you are your habits. So you are, sounds obvious, but there's some real, a real philosophical point here that everything that you do is kind of on automatic most of the time. And that is just a habit loop that can be broken, will be broken. Your habits 10 years time will be different to today. So be an active participant in what your habits are and how your habits are adapting. So yeah, you are your habits. Audit and be on guard, because that's where it's going to either move you onto the path or drag you off the path.
Excellent advice. I'm definitely going to write those down and apply them. So I definitely appreciate that advice, man. That's good stuff. So if our listeners want to connect with you, Nick, what's the best way for them to connect with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I invite them to really. I've the fitleandad.com. So fitleandad.com is my new website, and it's work in progress. But if they go there, they can sign up to a free challenge that I run. That's all about energy. So health and fitness is my bag, and getting people fit and healthy is what I'm about, my mission. But I transpose that initially through the lens of energy, and I have a free challenge that they can take part in and kind of really audit what's going on, build some more energy that then will allow them to knock down some of the other dominoes. For me, it's the big domino to progressing and moving forward. Yeah, that's probably the primary source. I'm on the socials as Elemental Nick, so they can hit me up there and we can have a chat. And I'm always up for a conversation.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link all that information in the show notes as well. So our guys can, if they're watching on YouTube, look at the description, and that'll be there. If you're listening on the podcast, check out the show notes, because all of his links and information will be there as well. So, hey, Nick, I really appreciate having you on the show. This is good stuff, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely welcome. It's been an honor. Real pleasure. I love the questions, and I'm excited to hear how it comes out.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Nick, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. I really appreciate you. I appreciate you and your story and the things that you've been through. Guys, if you want to show Nick some love, you want to get connected with him, please check out his links in the show notes. You can see the links in the description on YouTube, in the show notes on your podcast app, or at our manlihood.com blog, where you can see that information as well. So please click through, learn what he's doing, connect with him. If you appreciated this interview, shoot him a message and let him know. I got to tell you guys, I am grateful that you guys have been a part of what we're doing here at Manlihood, because this is not just about me. It's not just about the things I'm learning. Well, I do learn a lot, and all of this information is helping me. Every interview that I do and every topic that I talk to you about is something that's helping me. And I'm really grateful that you guys are taking this journey along with me. So if you want to be a part of that, you want to discuss that, you want to be something, you want to talk about that together, the best place to do that is the Manlihood Man Cave. So if you go on Facebook, you can join the Manlihood Man Cave private Facebook group for men only. You'll have to answer a couple questions so that we know that you're a man, and then we'll add you to the group. So introduce yourself. We'd love to have you in there. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. Please share this episode with a friend that needs it. Let's see if we can help others get the benefit out of this podcast that you and I are getting out of it. Thanks for listening, guys. I want you to know that I love you and I care about you. I'll see you next time.
If you want to be a better man, check out our website, manlihood.com, for blogs, videos, and more from our Manlihood team. And you can also join our private Facebook group, Manlihood Man Cave, where you can meet up with a band of brothers who will challenge you and help you on your journey of manhood. This episode's produced by Hatcher Media for manlihood.com. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to the show. Tune in again for more of the Manlihood Mancast.